This verse on friends, these are the words of the Buddha in a text called the Mitavago. Mitavago. I think it's a canonical source. I'm not 100% sure about that. It's kind of an obscure text. And I'll recite to you the Pali, which are the words that you heard in the song a moment ago, and then the translation. And this will sort of also set the theme for tonight. Upakaro chayomito, sukadukko chayosaka, atakayi chayomito, yochamitanu kampako, etepimite chataro, iti vinyaya pandito, sakajampai rupasea, mataputamba orasam. A friend who is helpful, one who shares in your sorrows and your joys, one who points you to worthwhile things, and one deeply sympathetic to friends. These four the wise know to be true friends. Thus attend to them earnestly, just as a mother holds her child close to her breast. So the spirit of this passage is largely that the friends that we have on the path are really quite extraordinary. They don't always include people that we may want to be supportive to our aspirations, to the practice that we may try to make time for. Some of us have had people who don't understand. What am I doing? When I was younger, I was raised in a Protestant environment. My dad was a Lutheran minister, and his deep sorrow and hurt when I left the Christian church to start practicing Buddhism and exploring other traditions like Advaita Vedanta and all of that. It wasn't easy between us during that time. And over time, it's interesting. At the time, I needed friends. I needed people on the path who could help open those doors, who could help me explore more deeply the meaning of the teachings, and even more so, how they apply to my life. And interestingly, before he died, my father became that for me. I've never quite articulated it this way. But it was really, we kind of grew into a very special relationship where we could explore together. He coming from his Christian theology, which he was extremely skilled at and knowledgeable, and yet also curious about how we bring these traditions together. How do we make sense of this? How can he make sense of it too? It was really quite nice and quite beautiful. And the thing that it pivoted around were the teachings on compassion. And that was something that, as a man, he had always embodied. He was an extremely loving human being. He was a very compassionate man. And so there was real opportunity there to dive in with bare feet and walk together through this terrain. It was really beautiful. So just a moment of deep bow for my dad, what he brought to me. And one of the things that characterizes this term, Kalyanamitra, it's been translated in different ways. Often it's called spiritual companion or spiritual friend. Some people don't really care for the word spiritual, and I get it. It's okay. Sometimes the word is translated as a noble friend or noble companion. One of the more accurate meanings is praiseworthy. Kalyana is praiseworthy, that this person is really has a lot of merit, and they're really it's commendable what they bring into this friendship with you. And so I think I prefer Dharma friend. If we're talking about a Buddhist context anyway, it's okay to say this is a Dharma friend. In some communities, you have a Dharma brother or Dharma sister. This is also very common. It's more than just a friend, but it's someone that you are in a relationship with, almost like a spiritual family. And one of my dear friends, Lama Willa Baker, who's really one of the finest Western Dharma teachers I know, she very seriously says that Sangha, or the community, the practice community, really is like family. Only one of the differences here is that this family is there really dedicated to your well-being, and for you to also contribute your wisdom and your feedback to people that is rooted in the spirit of their well-being. In other words, no agenda on our end, but just a real aspiration for someone else to thrive, to flourish, to become realized. So traditionally speaking, a Kalyanamitra can be, usually the context behind this term is a mentor of some kind, a teacher, or maybe someone in a community that has walked the path, that has some insights, that knows the teachings well. But that can also be a good friend, someone that understands the teachings, the methods, the aims of the path in particular, where you sort of share that common language, that common aspiration, and you're there for each other if something happens and you're not sure exactly, what is happening to you or how to apply the teachings. So in that sense, in the Upada Sutra, the Buddha talks about what kinds of skills do we need to be a really good friend on this path. And part of it is that in this text, first, he starts by saying that our seclusion, our solitude, and our solitary practice of meditation is understood that it occurs with these Kalyanamitres nearby or as supporters. That it's one thing to cultivate a meditation practice or be on a path of some kind and read books, and there are a lot of people in this situation, particularly people who don't have access, perhaps, in certain parts of the country to maybe a meditation center or a yoga teacher that can teach meditation. And so there's a lot that happens online and a lot of loneliness around understanding the practice. Believe me, I get emails often from people everywhere with questions, and I simply cannot respond to all of them. Actually, quite a few of them might I respond to, especially if they know someone that knows me, that kind of thing. But that's not uncommon. And so there is a need there. And the Buddha said it very clearly. A community or a Kalyanamitra is not just half of the path. He said it is the path. That's how important this was to the Buddha. After all, community or Sangha is one of the three jewels in Buddhism. It is one of the three things that we hold that the Buddha said these are utterly, uncompromisingly sacred. And that's the Buddha as teacher, the Dharma, the teachings, and the community, the practice community. And so Kalyanamitra is that which is rooted in either a practice community or a sort of a shared aspiration on the path or in the path or whatever it may be. And I'm going to be interested in your feedback. Anyone in a bit after we practice, I'd love to open it up and see what you think about these themes, and also maybe where you are in this. How are you doing with finding a noble friend or a praiseworthy friend who is really there for you on the path and really understands deeply not just what you need, but also how to support you? So here are the qualities that the Buddha tells us to be a good Kalyanamitra or a helpful one. Number one, we seek to be skillful. We seek to be discerning. And discernment here is maybe a little different than, say, you have a really close friend, and you know how it is when someone says, "Oh, this happened to me the other day," and you say, "Oh, that happened to me once," and then you tell them all about your story. Well, that may not be skillful if you're supporting someone on the path, replacing their story and putting yourself into it. That's what friends do. I'm not knocking that. But really, the capacity to listen, like without the three faults of a vessel. Has anybody heard this metaphor before? The three faults of a vessel. As a good listener, this was articulated by the great Tsongkhapa, the Kagyu master in the 14th century. He said this about listening to Dharma teachings, but I and some of my colleagues apply it to listening to another person who comes for help. And number one, we don't want to listen like an overturned pot. This is the meaning of the word vessel, that which holds water. If a pot is overturned, what happens when you try to fill it with water? Nothing gets in. Nothing gets in. It remains empty. And in this case, water would be the teachings, or water could be really the experience of another person that we would like to ultimately take in. So that's the first sort of pot that isn't really very helpful. So it has to be right side up so it's fillable. The second fault of a vessel is a leaky pot, meaning you put something into it, and what happens? It just runs out the bottom through the cracks, through the leaks. It can't hold it. So in this sense, we really want to be able to retain what someone is telling us. We want to be right side up and receptive. Maybe we can listen doing a handstand. I don't know, but I've never tried that. The point is, yeah, that we're able to take it in. And then the third kind of a pot is either a dirty pot or a pot that has poison in it, a poison pot. Sometimes it's called that. And that stuff that makes the pot either toxic or dirty, the water that you put into it, is all of our own kinds of ideas and projections onto the person, the things that cloud the water, that make it unpalatable. Before we even really listen, we have an answer. Yeah. And so we really want to receive. We want to be right side up. We want to be without holes. We want to retain and not put all of this sort of projection and outward directed thought into what we're hearing, but just be fully receptive, really listening. And so this is one way, anyway, that we can articulate discernment and how to be a skillful listener. And before we speak or we respond with insight and with compassion. And because, again, we're talking about a path. We're talking about someone who has their own path, largely, within hopefully a shared understanding, or at least we're learning about their sort of journey on the path, or their path overall. So that's the first thing, is to be skillful and discerning. The third one is time. A sense of slowing down time. Now, the Buddha says in this text that time, just spending time. And in my opinion, so when I was doing clinical chaplaincy, a part of what I intentionally tried to bring into the room of a cancer patient was a sense of just slowing down what is happening to the person. What is it that they're going through? Let's just stop time together for a moment and spend time relating, slowing it down, and really having a sense that that I'm not in a rush, I'm not stressed, I'm not nervous as the listener, but I'm really fully present. And if someone is knocking at the door, this will always happen in the hospital, a doctor would come, and sometimes, I know, Meg, you're a doctor, and I don't want to disparage doctors, but sometimes there's this sense of, I'm the doctor, I'm here, all I have is these 5 minutes. So whatever else is happening, you have to put it aside. Yeah. And I would always look at the patient and say, is it okay? Would you like to stop? Would you like, to shift gears? And sometimes they would say, would you please wait outside? I'm talking to my chaplain. Okay, well, that's a tall order. And I'm kind of honored by that and humbled by it. And, Meg is not this kind of doctor. I know Meg, and she's awesome. Um, and she's a palliative care physician. So, I mean, tend to be very sensitive. So I hope you don't mind. I'm putting you on the spot there. Um, anyway, the point here is that sense of time is really helpful. We want to be really present to someone and listen, offer them that skill and that discernment with a sense of time. And then exploring together. So part of it, the way that it's talked about in this text is discussing. Now, discussing what? Well, maybe it's, who's going to the Super Bowl? Probably not. Probably what's more helpful is talking about exploring where somebody really needs support. And those of you who are training for chaplaincy, I think there may be one or two here on the call, this is sounding a lot like what we do as chaplains or as spiritual counselors. Exactly. In fact, I often call chaplaincy, for me, being in a position of giving care in that way, a Kalyanamitra. That's how I identify it. A spiritual companion to somebody who is in a vulnerable situation, in a hospital bed, or taking infusion treatments. So it's not that different. Exploring together, rather than just giving advice, or problem solving, but really asking questions, really diving in, trying to get to the heart of the matter for that person so that they feel a sense of connection with you. They feel like you're hearing, you're understanding them. The next quality is the quality of integrity, of dignity, that you take this authentically and seriously when someone is communicating with you, that they can trust that your confidentiality maybe is solid, that you can listen to it and you're not going to spread it around the community, what this person said or that person said. So integrity here is just really feeling a sense of taking seriously what you're hearing thoughtfully and with a sense of privacy. Being generous, having a spirit of generosity. So whatever that means, that doesn't mean if somebody is suffering, you open your checkbook. If people still use a checkbook, I don't know. But and say, oh, here, I'll give you whatever you want. But it's the spirit of generosity that comes with your time, your thoughtfulness, your presence, your support, and your knowledge of the teachings. Sharing maybe your insights, but not making them gospel. I know that we're outside the Buddhist tradition when we use that word, right, Anne? But anyway, the spirit of generosity, the spirit of friendliness, of loving kindness is part of that. And these are qualities that the Buddha himself said, these are important for a Kalyanamitra. And reminding ourselves that this is essential to the path, to have others there, that we can't do all of this just by ourselves. We can certainly meditate, practice, learn. And yet one of the benefits to a spiritual friendship or a Dharma friend is also that you are learning how to relate mindfully. This was one of the themes of the just beautiful retreat some of us were on last weekend. There are a number of you here, and it was just such a wonderful time being with you. It has stayed with me, and it was just a really lovely weekend. And part of, I think, what we're looking at here is really, for some of you who maybe were on retreat for the first time, really having a sense of what's possible in community. By sharing, you're not just sharing your experience and hopefully being held in a loving holding space, but also you're creating that space for someone else. That mindful relating means I'm showing up and bringing this, bringing kind of the way that I really want to be in the world for others. I have an opportunity to practice this, to practice these qualities of time and generosity and discernment and all of that, thoughtfulness. So this is part of it too, is taking it off the cushion so that we can integrate more into our lives with these teachings. And this happens in community. The Buddha also talked about building merit. It's a really good opportunity to build merit, to basically build some wholesome karma by being a friend in this way to someone, through interrelating, whether we're allowing or encouraging someone else to provide that for us joyfully, or we are sincerely providing that for someone else. And in that, there are reminders of cultivating for the benefit of other beings. Again, this brings us back to the bodhicitta motivation. So those are some thoughts here. The categories of Kalyanamitra, this lovely term, it rolls off the tongue nicely. If you want, you can try it. Just say Kalyanamitra. Kalyanamitra. So we're talking about a friend, sort of someone in the community, like a Dharma brother or sister or a spiritual companion. We could also be talking about a mentor, or a teacher, someone who has walked the path, who really cares about our well-being and brings their thoughtfulness and insights. But we're also talking about the Buddha. And the Buddha encouraged us to consider him this Dharma friend, this meaningful, noble companion on the path. Largely because he did not want us to be alone here. You see this also in some of the great treatises in Mahayana Buddhism, like Shantideva and the Bodhisattva Way of Life, the Bodhicharyavatara, where you really feel his concern for us as he is giving us these really profound and very sort of intense teachings of what it takes to become a bodhisattva and the 6 perfections and such. It's a dynamic text, but you feel his passion for us. He doesn't want us to feel alone here on this path. So remembering that if you are in a position where you just feel like, I don't even know what my path is, much less where I'm going to find people to support me on this, or that I trust, or I feel a sense of kinship with, where it's not complicated and, tension is there, and all of these things that unfortunately tend to muddy the water or make the pot murky. That the Buddha, it may not be the Buddha. Maybe it is Christ. Maybe it is Ramakrishna. Maybe it's someone else. But the point is that you are accompanied on the path by a Kalyanamitra that you may not be able to see or hear, but within your heart, I imagine you all know this is true, that you are accompanied on the path. Whatever that mystery might be. Maybe it's not a mystery, but let's remember that we have that spiritual friend or friends or these benefactors that are really in our corner and supporting us wherever we are.